Hello, everyone. My name is Francis Donald, and I'd like to welcome you to this first episode in a series of webinars on the Secret Doctrine, one of the most significant of all occult works, written just over 130 years ago by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Okay, I'd like to introduce the rest of the staff. See, who do we have on this side of the wall here? We've got B.L. Allison, who will be assisting me in calling on people to raise their hands. Hey, B.L., say hi.
Hello, everybody.
And then Brett Mitchell, who is our disaster control engineer. Hopefully there will be no disasters. And Joe Waltz, who's also with us today as a staff member.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. So we have a good group here. It looks like 47 and counting. It's just terrific. I'm so happy to see there's that much interest in this material. So first of all, I want to say that this webinar and all subsequent episodes will be available on makara.us. This is their home screen page, and you see that list of webinars on the left there. You'll be able to scroll down and find the webinar. Would it be under the Moria Federation webinars? Oops.
Yes, but we'll have a dedicated page to it, and
okay.
I will then start putting that in the announcements, and it will be on the announcement that we have on the Moira Federation external website too.
Okay,
so
for the
it'll be
Makara.
easy to find, but it'll have a dedicated web page.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so for those of you who want to keep up with this or are interested in staying with this material, if you have to miss, you'll be able to find, each episode sequentially on makara.us. Okay, some quick housekeeping stuff. Don't want to spend much time on this, but I don't know who's new and who isn't to this whole concept of the GoToMeeting interface that we're using. So you see there on the upper left, you'll see the microphone icon. It's very similar to your actual control panel microphone, second button down, right? So you'll want to keep, because there's so many of us, you'll want to keep yourself muted, self-muted. It's a double control. We control it on this side and on your side. So if you raise your hand, BL will call on you and unmute you from our side, but you will have to then unmute yourself as well. So you just click on that icon, get a little pop-up screen that says unmute, right? So it's pretty much as soon as you raise your hand, you want to be ready to do that, because we always have these pauses where people are trying to find the unmute button. We'd like to keep it moving. Okay, an even more important button to the right there is the raise and lower hand button, okay? And you'll see it there, just a couple below the mic button. And so just click on that, and that alerts us that you would like to speak, to ask a question or to make a comment or to read a quote that I have up on the screen. Let's see, the only other thing I'd like to point out is the message box, which is in the chat box area. It's the second box down there. This allows you to share with us pretty much anything. So if you're having problems with your microphone, or you don't have a headset and you have a very noisy connection, or you would like to copy paste a quote, anything like that, then you can reach us through this message box. Alrighty, headsets. Your webinar experience is going to be a lot better for you and for everyone else if you have a headset. without one. Speaking sometimes sets up a disruptive echo. There's ambient noise. And so, I very much recommend it. They're not expensive. This is a bunch on Amazon that you can get for between $10 and $20. Just go by the ratings, find yourself let's see, here's one that Amazon is a #1 bestseller, or, Amazon's choice, whatever. Anyway, I haven't found one that doesn't work fine. So you don't need to spend a bunch of bucks. Just, I think $15, $16 will get you one. But you really will you'll be able to hear better. And when you speak to us, it'll be much, much better. Okay. So whether or not you have a headset, feel free to enter questions and comments in the text box, which you can also use if for some reason you're having problems with your audio, keep you connected. Okay, enough housekeeping. Let's get to it. I'd like to introduce you to one of the most extraordinary women of the 19th or any century, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who I'll refer to in future as HPB. Though she wrote the most influential body of occult works of the 19th century and is known primarily for this, she was very much more than just an author. I'll be quoting extensively from the 5-volume Old Diary Leaves, written by Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, HPB's near constant companion for the last 16 years of her life. Olcott was a formidable personage in his own right, and would probably be much more famous if it weren't for the fact that he pretty much dedicated the greater part of his energies to facilitating HPB's work on many levels. The whole process would have been much more difficult without him. They felt that it was karma when they met, and that it was a destined connection. For instance, it was he and not HPB that founded the Theosophical Society. A lot of people think Blavatsky did this, but it was Olcott. And to this day, his birthday is celebrated as a national holiday in Sri Lanka for his work in restoring Buddhism to that country. Olcott says, and here I'd like to introduce the concept of readers. What we want to do is we'd like to be able to have you all be willing to read. But if for some reason, like you have a lousy connection, or you're very shy, or any other reason, you don't want to do it, let BL know. And basically, everyone else, BL will just call on you sequentially to read the material. So, we'll start with people we know have no problem reading. BL, you could choose somebody, and then in the next few minutes, if you really don't want to read, and hey, it's no big deal, guys, then go ahead and let BL know. But otherwise, it'd be terrific. The more people that are involved in this, the more it feels like a group participation, which is what we'd really like to see happening here. Okay, BL, let's see. So I'll just ask you, first of all, if you would like to read, and this will be the first time the last time we'll ask this, because after this, we'll just call on you if you don't text us. But for now, please raise your hand if you're willing to read this passage. Okay, terrific. I see people already. Great. Go ahead, BL. I'm going to leave this up to you.
Please go ahead, Clesia.
Hello, good evening. Where was there a human being of such a mixture as this mysterious, this fascinating, this light-bringing HPB? Where can we find a personality so remarkable and so dramatic, one which so clearly presented as its opposite sides the divine and the human? Karma forbid that I should do her a featherweight of injustice, but if there were ever existed a person in history who was a greater conglomeration of light and shadow, wisdom and indiscretion, spiritual insight and lack of common sense, I cannot recall the name, the circumstances, or the epoch.
Thank you,
ODL.
Kezia. Appreciate it. Yeah, ODL stands for Old Diary Leaves, which is Olcott's 5-volume set. So his is by far the best biography because he lived with her and he saw a lot of what happened in HBB's life come down. So we're told that HBB was impractical and gullible to a fault, often trusting the untrustworthy and giving away money even when in dire straits herself. For instance, in 1874 or thereabouts, she received instruction from her master to drop everything and go to the U.S. immediately. She was living in Paris at the time and was waiting to board a steamer when she noticed a woman sobbing and a child sitting nearby. She approached them and soon discovered that they'd been swindled out of their steerage passage. So she cashed in her own first-class ticket and with the money bought 3 fares in steerage, enduring the stench and discomfort and lack of privacy so that the woman and child might gain passage to America. She met the Colonel, soon after arriving in the U.S. That's Colonel Olcott. Both happened to be investigating a pair of spiritualists in Chittenden, Vermont, called the Eddy Brothers. We could do a whole webinar on the phenomenon of these 2 brothers, but we're not going to. But they were able to conjure the spirits of the dead and actually make them visible to the people in the seance room. And Olcott and HBB tested the circumstances, and they came away feeling that there was no trickery, that it was actually really happening. Anyway, Olcott describes this meeting with HBB, his first meeting with HBB. So, Reaper, please.
Okay, let's go with one of the volunteers we had earlier. Cheryl, can you please read for us?
Yes. My eye was first attracted by a scarlet Garibaldian shirt the former wore, as in vivid contrast with the dull colors around. Her hair was then a thick blonde mop, worn shorter than the shoulders, and it stood out from her head, silken soft and crinkled to the roots like the fleece of a Cotswold ewe. This and the red shirt were what struck my attention before I took in the picture of her features. It was a massive Kalmuck face, contrasting in its suggestion of power, culture, and imperiousness, so as strangely with the commonplace visages about the room as her red garment did with the gray and white tones of the walls and woodwork and the dull costumes of the rest of the guests. ODL.
Thank you. So she and the Colonel soon became fast friends. They both recognized their karmic tie, and she told him during their initial conversation at the time that she had fought alongside Garibaldi at the Battle of Mentana in Italy. Olcott states, can we have a reader for this brief paragraph? There's Giuseppe Garibaldi.
Joanna, could you read for us, please?
Yes. In proof of her story, she showed me where her left arm had been broken in 2 places by a saber stroke, and made me feel in her right shoulder a musket bullet still embedded in the muscle, and another in her leg. She also showed me a scar just below the heart where she had been stabbed with a stiletto. This wound reopened a little while she was at Shittington, and it was to consult me about it that she was led to show it to me. ODL.
Thank you. So within months of their return to New York, HPB and Colonel Olcott moved in together, though the relationship remained completely platonic. She quickly became known throughout the city for her occult knowledge and powers, and attracted to their doorstep extraordinary characters from around the globe. Among the callers was an Italian artist, a Signor B, formerly a Carbonari, which was a group of Italian revolutionaries. That was the group that Garibaldi was associated with. We have this description from Olcott, and this is a long quote, but I think you'll enjoy the story. So we need an intrepid reader for this one.
Oh,
This
I have just
storytelling.
the intrepid reader for you.
Oh, perfect.
Walter, our intrepid
Oh, yes. Welcome, Walter.
Thank you. I was sitting alone with her in her drawing room when he made his first visit. They talked of Italian affairs, and he suddenly pronounced the name of one of the greatest of the adepts. She started as if she had received an electric shock, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, in Italian, "What is it? I am ready." He passed it off carelessly, but thenceforward the talk was all about magic, magicians, and adepts. Signor B went and opened one of the French windows, made some beckoning passes towards the outer air, and presently a pure white butterfly came into the room and went flying about near the ceiling. HPB laughed in a cheerful way and said, "That is pretty, but I can also do it." She too opened the window, made similar beckoning passes, and presently a second white butterfly came fluttering in. It mounted to the ceiling, chased the other around the room, played with it now and then, with it flew to a corner, and presto, both disappeared at once while we were looking at them. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Only this, that Signor B can make an elemental turn itself into a butterfly, and so can I. The insects were not real, but illusionary ones. I recall other instances of her control of elementals, or as Hindus would term it, Yakshini Vidya. An early one is the following. On a cold winter's night, when several inches of snow lay upon the ground, she and I were working upon her book until a late hour at her rooms in 34th Street. I had eaten some saltish food for dinner, and at about 1 a.m., feeling very thirsty, said to her, 'Would it not be nice to have some hothouse grapes?' 'So it would,' she replied. 'Let us have some.' 'But the shops have been closed for hours, and we can buy none,' I said. 'No matter, we shall have them all the same,' was her reply. 'But how?' 'I will show you, if you will just turn down that gas light on the table in front of us.' I turned the cock unintentionally so far around as to extinguish the light. 'You need not have done that,' she said. 'I only wanted you to make the light dim. However, light it again quickly.' A box of matches lay just at hand, and in a moment I had relit the lamp. 'See,' she exclaimed, pointing to a hanging bookshelf on the wall before us. To my amazement, there hung from the knobs at the two ends of one of the shelves 2 large bunches of ripe black Hamburg grapes, which we proceeded to eat. To my question as to the agency employed, she said it was done by certain elementals under her control, and twice later on, when we were living in the so-called Lamasery, she repeated the phenomenon of bringing fruits for our refreshment while at work on Isis. ODL, page 16 to 17.
Great. Thanks, Walter. Very animated. That's great. I think we can dispense with the reciting the ODL. all these are going to be, during this section, are going to be from ODL, so we can skip that part. So over the next few years, Olcott watched HP grow in ways that astounded and confounded him. He described one of these events as, quote, a certain wonderful psychophysiological change that I am not at liberty to speak about, which kind of brings up the idea that, for every published event describing HPB's life, there were likely many more, much more astonishing events that, could not be given out to the public. These would in large part have to do with her relationship to various masters, which she eventually introduced to Olcott. He gives us this account. By the way, these aren't her masters. They're just 4 masters pictures that I was able to find. There are no, unfortunately, there are no pictures of the 4 masters that she worked with. So could we get a reader for this section?
Let's see. Sheldon, can you read for us, please?
All right. HPB brought 4 of the masters to my attention, of whom one was a Copt, one a representative of the Neoplatonist Alexandrian school, one a very high one, a master of the masters, so to say, a Venetian, and one an English philosopher, gone from men's sight, yet not dead. The first of these became my first guru, and a stern disciplinarian he was. In time I came to know from themselves that HPB was a faithful servant of theirs, though her peculiar temperament and idiosyncrasies made her too antipathetic to some of them to permit of their working with her. This will not seem strange if one remembers that each individual man, whether adept or
like a lay person.
Aha, thank you. Has evolved along a particular ray of the Logos and is in spiritual sympathy with his associate souls of that ray, and may be in antagonism on this physical plane with entities of another ray when clothed in flesh. This is probably the ultimate ratio of what is called magnetic, auric, or psychical sympathy and antipathy. Whatever the reason, maybe some of the masters could not and did not work with HPB, period. Several did, among them some whose names have never as yet been given out, but whom I had much intercourse with in those early years of the Theosophical Society movement.
Great, thanks, Sheldon. Appreciate it. What do you think he means by this phrase, the ultimate ratio of what is called magnetic or psychical sympathy and antipathy? He's talking here about the connection between, a given master and HPB, which, by the way, many of them came to a place where they were when they were talking about her to each other, they would call her the body, right? It was literally like an anchoring place where the writing could take place, could manifest in the physical world, right? But she herself was removed, and she once described it as, standing somewhat outside herself and a short distance off, completely aware, and just watching the proceedings as they took place during, with that master in her body. But back to my questions. What do you think is meant by this phrase, the ultimate ratio of what is called magnetic auric or psychical sympathy? Do we have anybody that wants to take a stab at that one? Yeah, I see Eva, you have your hand up. Yeah, you'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay.
The only thing I can think of offhand would be that there was a resonance. This would probably be the resonance, the magnetic quality that would have allowed them to work together. Could it be karma? Could it be rays?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
those are the things that come to mind.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. It's as though it's like occult science. You know, it's not an emotional situation here. You know, it's not like, oh, I can't stand to work with HPV. I think it's literally vibrational. You know, where there are certain vibratory frequencies that just couldn't tolerate or mesh with her particular frequency. That's my take on it. Any other thoughts on that? Do we have any SD scholars on board, you know, that really have this one sussed out?
Rose?
Yes, I think it would be something similar to what was said, and just that it's just easier. One of the philosophies that she always was, you know, expounding was the conservation of force. So you would do that which is easiest to do versus something that's really hard to do. So with someone along a similar vibratory energetic ray line, it's going to be a lot easier to make that communication telepathically or whatever versus it's just going to be a struggle.
Yeah, right. Hey, thanks, Rose, and welcome. It's great to hear your voice. Rose Bates.
Thank you.
So, yeah, and it also worked from the other side, right? That these masters, in some cases, just simply couldn't approach her, you know, even if they might have had something very useful, you know, to add to her work. They were, you could say, where's the magnetically, aurically, or psychically antipathetic, that is in a place of scientific resistance to approaching her energetically. So, yeah, I think we got a sense of that. Good. So, thank you.
Francis,
Yeah.
Michael had a comment. He had his hand up.
Stacy, go for it.
Yes, okay. Perhaps part of it could be a harmonious resonance that had been developed over many previous associations, many previous incarnations with those that she was working with, whereas that hadn't happened with other masters.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, there were certainly her own actual guru was, you know, one of these masters. And certainly they had developed an easy connection and rapport. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, because HPV's life in and of itself reveals so many facets of the ancient wisdom teachings, we will continue to look at relevant incidents during the coming webinars. In fact, what I'd like to do is precede our real in-depth work in the SD, the Secret Doctrine, with you know, tales of lore, so to speak, of HPV's life. And what I presented today is just a tiny fraction of the many miraculous events that I read through, and, you know, just chose these few. It's really an extraordinary life that she led. Okay, so let's get on to the Secret Doctrine. Because HPV's life the oldest known draft of the Secret Doctrine, known now as the Würzburg edition, was sent by HPV to the occultist A.P. Sinnott. He wrote Esoteric Buddhism in 1885, 3 years before SD's publication. The original manuscript of this Würzburg manuscript wasn't discovered until 1921 in Adyar, India. It was kind of an interesting situation. Olcott just went into this empty room And there were these empty bookcases, but sitting on top of one of the bookcases was this original manuscript of the Secret Doctrine that just hadn't been touched. It would, you know, considering all the precipitation that she was involved in, you know, precipitating articles of clothing and everything else, you know, one could very much suspect that this was precipitated because the chance of it sitting there for 33 years since, you know, the publication of the original Secret Doctrine is pretty slim. It would seem that somebody would have seen it, realized its extraordinary value, and grabbed it. So anyway, and it's amazing. It offers some tantalizing alternative interpretation, especially of the stanzas of Zahn. Some of the stanzas themselves are worded slightly differently, and the interpretations, she changed them. It was the beginning draft. So, you know, we in the later Secret Doctrine, we have what she finally wanted to have come out to the public. But this earlier version really does give us insight into this material. So, on to the preface, where we'll take a look at a few paragraphs that will help us to understand certain aspects of the Secret Doctrine. HPB starts by telling us, and we need a reader, please.
Rose, can you read for us, please? You're self-muted.
This is in the brief preface.
These truths are in no sense put forward as a revelation, for what is contained in this work is to be found scattered throughout thousands of volumes embodying the scriptures of the great Asiatic and early European religions, hidden under glyph and symbol and hitherto left unnoticed because of this veil. What is now attempted is to be gathered the oldest tenets together and to make of them one harmonious and unbroken whole. It is perhaps desirable to state unequivocally that the teachings, however fragmentary and incomplete, contained in these volumes belong neither to the Hindu, the Zoroastrian, the Chaldean, nor the Egyptian religion, neither to Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, or Christianity exclusively. The Secret Doctrine is the essence of all these. Sprung in their origins, the various religious schemes are now made to merge back into their original element, out of which every mystery and dogma has grown, developed, and become materialized.
So this is really the first time that anyone attempted to do this, to go to the parent doctrine, or rather through the most esoteric examples of each religion's secret and most occult text, to tease out or bring forth this essential parent doctrine that she calls the Secret Doctrine. And to my knowledge, no one did it before her, though there was a, Isis Unveiled, which was published about 13 years earlier, and there were a couple of others that touched on the idea, but nothing like the Secret Doctrine. Okay, so here for the first time, HPB alludes to a parent teaching from which all religions sprang. We find a similar teaching from DK, who gives us passages from the old commentary and tells us of Sinzar, an ideographic language that pre-exists all languages. And before you grab your phones and take a picture of this picture, this is unfortunately not Sinzar. You're not going to find a page of Sinzar, on the internet, I'm afraid. And then in the next sentence, we're introduced in the most offhanded way to the stanzas of Zion. This also is not the stanzas of Zion. She says, "It is more than probable that the book will be regarded by a large section of the public, he's talking about Secret Doctrine here, as a romance of the wildest kind. For who has ever even heard of the Book of Zion, or Zion? You know, if anybody knows definitively how to pronounce this, I'd welcome their input. I say Zan because I've heard it pronounced that way. So finally, in this prelude, it's just a few pages, HPB states her objective for writing the book. So could we get and try to, let's see if we can bring new people in every time for this reading here. And if people don't have their hand raised or haven't, we'll implement our new protocol, which is if they haven't texted you saying they don't want to read, then they're fair game. Okay.
I'm implementing that.
Terrific.
Let's go with Eva, please.
My daughter lives, my two daughters live there with her grandkids. Anyway, I said to her, in another lifetime.
Never.
Okay, that's not going to work. So.
Yeah, let's try. Gabrielle, can you read for us, please?
You have to undo your self-mute, Gabrielle.
No, she's okay. She's okay.
Speak, let's try. Try someone else.
Okay.
I can read BL if you'd like.
Thank you, Joe. Go ahead, please.
The aim of this work may be thus stated: to show that nature is not a fortuitous concurrence of atoms, and to assign to man his rightful place in the scheme of the universe, to rescue from degradation the archaic truths, which are the basis of all religions, and to uncover, to some extent, the fundamental unity from which they all spring. Finally, to show that the occult side of nature has never been approached by the science of modern civilization. If this is in any degree accomplished, the writer is content. It is written in the service of humanity and by humanity and the future generations. It must be judged.
That's probably a misprint. It's like, and for future generations.
Its author recognizes no inferior court of appeal. Abuse she is accustomed to. Calumny she is daily acquainted with. At slander she smiles in silent contempt.
So, welcome to the uniquely piquant personality of HPB. This wit and verve, inhabits all of her work. So, in the introduction, and the Secret Doctrine has it all. It has a historical introduction, a preface, an introduction, and a proem, right? So you finally get to the meat of the material. Well, really, the proem is page 1. After 100 and some plus pages, if you include the historical introduction. Anyway, in the introduction, HPB gives us a succinct definition of esoteric philosophy. She says, let's go ahead and bring this up and get a reader for this. Oh, by the way, I want to introduce a protocol here, and it is this. As we move forward and we come across words that are foreign to most of us, I will separate that out and put a definition, usually to the side. This one's to the side and above. So what I think would work best would be to start with the definition, so we have it in mind with when we actually read the passage. So start by reading the definition of en or ayin, and then move right on into the passage.
Michael, can you read for us, please?
There we go. Ein, the absolute deific principle, impersonal and unknowable, literally no thing.
So let me interrupt you a moment. This is often seen in the Judaic tradition of the Ayin Sof, which stands above the tree of life, even the highest point on that system called Kether, the Sephira called Kether. So, and that's she uses N and ends in this, but anyway, go ahead.
Esoteric philosophy reconciles all religions, strips every one of its outward human garments, and shows the root of each to be identical with that of every other great religion. It proves the necessity of an absolute divine principle in nature. It denies deity no more than it does the sun. Esoteric philosophy has never rejected God in nature, nor deity as the absolute and abstract eins. It only refuses to accept any of the gods of the so-called monotheistic religions, gods created by man in his own image and likeness, a blasphemous and sorry caricature of the ever unknowable.
Thank you. So, Blavatsky is not just content to introduce the idea of the unseen, unknowable, supreme one life, but she, also needs to, in her very particular acerbic way, to, put the the idea of personal gods really in their place for what she sees them as being. You can imagine how inflammatory this kind of language, calling, the God of the Christians a blasphemous and sorry caricature, that's really stepping up to the plate, so to speak, Okay. Let's see. Next up, HPB addresses the difference between the cosmic and planetary levels of consciousness. I think our best approach, as I said before, is to read the definitions first. So let's get two readers. Let's have somebody read the definitions. I'll say in advance, that's Arya Sangha or Shanga, I'm not sure which, Yogacharya, Adi, and Adi Buddha. The rest I think you can get. So can we get a reader for that, please?
Okay, let's see if Martha S. can read for us. Can you read for us, Martha, please?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes.
Arya Sangha, direct disciple of Gautama and founder of the first Yoga-Charya school. Yoga-Charya, one who has mastered the doctrines and practices of ecstatic meditation. Adi and Adi Buddha, supreme wisdom, the unknown deity. Adi Bhuta, the primeval uncreated cause of all. Buddha of wisdom unmoved, a human with one whose unparalleled virtues and knowledge. Bodha, the innate possession of divine intellect or understanding. Buddha, the acquirement of Bodha by personal efforts and merit. Buddhi, the faculty of cognizing the channel through which divine knowledge reaches the ego or spiritual soul, which is the vehicle of Atma. Bodhi, a particular trance condition called samadhi, during which the subject reaches the culmination of spiritual knowledge.
Thanks, Martha. So you can see, these are all deeply related. There's a definite division between Adi Buddha, the primeval, uncreated cause of all, and supreme wisdom, and then the next one down, which is this condition in a human being, right? The difference between these two levels here, and it's just interesting to note that that when there's an I on the end, it becomes a faculty or a condition, and whereas the actual personage is with an A on the end and has two D's. You know, the single D represents innate possession of divine intellect. So it's like, again, it's more like a condition. Anyway, you know, it's interesting. Now she's going to pretty much say the same thing again, and I don't think that's going to hurt at all to repeat this in the text itself. So could we get another reader, please? Just grab one on the list. And
Yep, I'm going to do that. Hello, Nathalie, can you read for us, please?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. In etymology, Adi and Adi Buddha, the one or the first, and supreme wisdom is a term used by Arya Sangha in his secret treatises, and now by all the mystic northern Buddhists. It is a Sanskrit term and an appellation given by the earliest Aryans to the unknown deity, the word Brahma not being found in the Vedas and the early works. It means the absolute wisdom, and Adi Bhuta is translated the primeval uncreated cause of all by Fitzedward Hall. Eons of untold duration must have elapsed before the epithet of Buddha was so humanized, so to speak, as to allow of the term being applied to mortals and finally appropriated to one whose unparalleled virtues and knowledge caused him to receive the title of the Buddha of wisdom, unmoved. Bodha means the innate possession of divine intellect or understanding. Buddha, the acquirement of it by personal efforts and merit, while buddhi is the faculty of cognizing. Oh, cognizing, it looked like an E, sorry. Cognizing the channel through which divine knowledge reaches the ego, the discernment of good and evil, divine conscious, also, and spiritual soul, which is the vehicle of Atma. When the buddhi absorbs our egotism, destroys it, with all its vikaras, Avalokiteshvara becomes manifested to us, and nirvana or mukti is reached. Mukti being the same as nirvana, that is, freedom from the trammels of maya or illusion. Bodhi is likewise the name of a particular state of trance condition called samadhi, during which the subject reaches the culmination of spiritual knowledge.
Good job. Yeah, that's there's a lot in that paragraph, right? Now, you have to remember that this hadn't been made available at all at this point, not in the West. And even in the East, you would have had to do what she did, but through her masters, troll through this obscure references, you know, to come up with this. And here we have a succinct definition of all these states of being related to the Buddha. And, it's very useful. So I think this is as good a place as any to open up our discussion. So any thoughts or questions about this paragraph?
Eva has her hand up.
Great. Let's go for it. Yes, Eva.
No. My hand was only up to do the reading. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're going to have to make some profound comment now that you're online. It's a requirement of our. No. Thanks, Eva.
Okay.
Anyone at all have any thoughts about just the relationship of these stages and states of consciousness? Anything? No?
Yes. Rose, please go ahead.
Yes, it's goes that you really Sanskrit, like you were saying, with whether it's with an I, with an A, the double D, to really it's a language that really conveys so much meaning through the spelling, and to really get into some of the definitions of these Sanskrit terms, knowing those things is so important. It's a whole system, and to understand this esoteric philosophy, and if you merge this into the works of Alice Bailey, the same goes true for that too. So perhaps, Francis, you should do a class someday on just the basics of Sanskrit, and it will kind of really give a much deeper meaning on some of these terms we're very familiar with, but not on this level.
Well, all I can say to address that at this point is, in Sanskrit, the particular characters that would represent these stages would be self-revealing. You know, there's a kind of pictographic quality to Sanskrit characters. And, you know, if someone or I or we were to do the research and find all these various states, I think it would be a fascinating study in the pictographic differences, and we may, you know, it may really point out something about that language, because, you know, this is just an attempt to put in English, probably mostly phonetically, you know, what the Sanskrit means. But some of that organization, as you point out, Rose, does carry over, right? I know that there's a particular, that HPB had a particular problem where people would try to correct her writing by sticking in another D when she would write B-U-D-H-A, because she was very particularly referring to the state of consciousness that the being who would have the two Ds would be in when he was a Buddha, right? So these are pretty particular. Yeah, any other thoughts, ideas about this?
Yes, Francis, Nathalie has a question. She says, did HPB speak or know Sanskrit or any other ancient languages?
Well, this brings up a tremendous topic. HPB was a conscious medium, and the word medium should be taken with a grain of salt here, because in fact she was an amanuensis. That is to say, the masters actually worked from within her body. As I mentioned before, the masters would collectively call her the body, right? You know, hey, have you been in the body? Or don't upset the body. You know, I have to use it at 2 o'clock, kind of a thing, right? And so the innate knowledge of HPB herself, though it became over time, you know, much more, you know, she became much more aware. It was mainly as a result of paying attention to those beings who inhabited her body. You know, it's a very different kind of a schoolroom than most of us are used to, right? So, in answer to your question, it wouldn't at all have been necessary for her to have known Sanskrit to write with real authority about the subject, as strange as that seems, because all she needed is to have one of the masters who did know about it write through her. There's some fascinating stories about this. You know, there was this one master who had in life had been a Rajput prince, and he had this Rajput princess had these long mustaches, you know, that curled on the ends. And so HPB, while she was writing and this master was inhabiting her body, she would reach up and start feeling and curling this imaginary, and it wasn't imaginary, it just wasn't physically seen because it was her body, this mustache. You know? So Olcott eventually, just by the way she was acting, could tell which master was inhabiting her at the time. So I hope that you know, helps shed some light on that.
Francis.
Yeah.
Hi, Francis. I have maybe an interesting piece
Who am
of
I speaking with?
information. This is Michael.
Oh, hi, Michael.
I'm kind of there. Arya Sangha is said by tradition to be an earlier incarnation of Jwal Khul. So this
wow.
is kind of interesting, and
Right.
it is said, yeah, I think so, and it is said that he had the ability to ascend to the Tushita heavens in meditation, and there contact the Lord Maitreya. So it seems
Yeah.
that we have in our Tibetan teacher quite an amazing a tradition of contact with some of those that we most respect as the teachers.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's
just a thought, interesting,
oh
I
yeah,
think, and
fabulous piece
just
of information.
throw it in, Okay,
Yeah,
thanks,
and
Francis. It's great you're doing this. I'm so happy about it.
I'm thrilled you're here, and I encourage you to step in whenever you would like. It's just wonderful to have those types of insights. It's so
Well,
much richer.
it's really
incredible.
interesting, I think. Okay, thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. So this throws a whole other light on it. We have this fundamental contact between the Buddha and DK, right? And we know that DK was one of the masters that overshadowed HPB, during this process of writing the Secret Doctrine, one of 6 primary masters. And so now we learn, and this really does bring Buddhism in at this esoteric level. It's a piece of connective tissue that's just very useful. So thank you so much for that, Michael. Yes, anyone else?
Yes, Stacia has her hand up, and I'll call on her in just a minute, though. Joe has typed a comment here. I am impressed by the subtlety of the differentiations, which seems so right in relation to the concepts. One must enter into a depth of listening, comprehending from the very beginning of consideration.
Oh, yes, it is so true. The need to stay really focused during this material will give you results that just can't be there otherwise. And it actually will sharpen your focus because, for the most part, you don't want to miss anything, right? And what you said is just right on. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, and the subtlety of these differentiations. If you grew up in Sanskrit, this would be like, describing in English, just the various qualities of, anything in your life, which we have an extensive language for, but we don't have any language for this kind of a thing, right? And so at first it seems or can seem ponderous, but eventually you get used to it. The more effort you put into the definitions side of these quotes, it will really pay off in the long run, because after a while you'll see that most of the terms repeat themselves, and it'll make the text itself so much more understandable. Okay. All right. Let's see. Can we find
Okay, Stacia, you want to go ahead, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Stacia.
You're unmuted, but I don't hear you.
Well, welcome, Stacia. I'm so glad you've joined us. If you figure out your mic stuff, you can jump in, whenever. But at this point, let's go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
Here we go. I have another one from Linda. Thank you so much for this discussion. Okay, she just says thank you, and she isn't going to be able to read today because of her mic. So I got that.
Okay.
Let's see. Michael has his hand up, and then
okay, Michael Stacy.
Oops.
There we go.
Go ahead.
Okay. You ask about consciousness, but that term can have so much going on with it. I decided to take on a study of consciousness for my long paper this year. And, I go to various dictionaries. A general use dictionary has 9 definitions of conscious. and 4 definitions of consciousness. Ness itself indicates state of. I go to a medical dictionary and it has something weird, and so then I go to the Secret Doctrine, and what we call the Constitution of Man, the 7 planes of the systemic or the cosmic physical plane. In the Secret Doctrine, those are called planes of consciousness.
Yeah. Right.
So
which is a definition you're not going to find in any of the exoteric references, that you quoted
Absolutely
before.
not.
Yeah, exactly. In
Yeah,
fact,
I'm finding that we all have an idea of what consciousness may be, but probably all slightly different.
yes, indeed. And DK says, I believe, Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, that at some point you transcend the whole concept of consciousness altogether, because consciousness very much belongs to the second principle of deity, the connective tissue, so to speak, between cause and the form world, right? And so even though your consciousness can progress, as soon as you move into a stage called identification, which is actually beyond alignment, beyond relationship, beyond infusion even, like the soul-infused personality. And in fact, we can't even describe, it's one of those things that you can only describe what it's not. Because I think DK tells us that it's not until the 3rd initiation that you even get a glimpse at what this state, and I think we're probably falling short even there, called identification. And so at that point, consciousness itself, in a sense, is out the window. And it certainly would be for this state here called Adi Buddha, or supreme wisdom, the unknown deity. And yet, it's the only word we have to represent different stages of awareness.
It becomes our opportunity to create the new language of the monad.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's right.
Some of consciousness is equivalent to soul, where soul is sort of a mingling of spirit and form. And, there's discussion within these books that soul and consciousness is the same thing. It's really quite interesting.
Well, yeah, consciousness is an attribute of the second aspect, which is epitomized by the term soul, right? And so you could say that the soul, in a sense, is supreme in within the limitation of the word consciousness, because it's the ultimate go-between, isn't it, between form and spirit. So yeah, you're right there.
So,
thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Stacia has her hand back up. Any love there?
We have some other people in line first, okay?
Go ahead.
And then we'll go back to her. Please go ahead, Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Good morning. Just a comment about Sanskrit and its subtleties. Besides the subtleties of the actual spelling, I think that if you, as you're pronouncing Sanskrit, where that happens within the physical form in the throat, in the mouth, that also adds much to the meaning as well.
Yes, indeed. I'm so glad you brought that up. In fact, I've heard that that the secrets in Sanskrit are actually held within the song, so to speak, of the way it's pronounced. That, you can, for instance, read the Sanskrit, and it's no secret. But said in a certain way, it becomes invocative to actual forces. And that method of reading, actually, that intoning, we don't really have anything like that. I mean, we have song in our language, but it's not that conscious, you know. But in Sanskrit, it's very conscious and it has very particular meaning. Thanks, Leah. That's the important point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else?
Stacia, yes, but let's go back to Stacia. You're self-muted, so please.
There you go.
There you go.
Hey, Stacia.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Thank you. Well, I apologize for my ignorance, but I've been working with equipment that's not mine, and now this phone is working. So I had difficulty getting on the beginning. So if you've already shared this, again, I apologize. But I did want to point out, if this has not been shared, the accompaniments to the Secret Doctrine of the Theosophical Glossary. And I know this is basic stuff,
so
probably not full, and also the index that accompanies the Secret Doctrine to help get a baseline of the language that where directly Blavatsky's coming from, has helped me, is helping me to learn. Knows I have plenty to learn.
Yes, thanks so much, Stacia. In fact, a number of the definitions that I presented, not these, the ones here, it came right out of the text to the left. But for the most part, whenever I can find definitions in her Theosophical Glossary, I use those because, of course, you know, since she wrote the Theosophical Glossary, it's going to best represent what she means when she uses those words in the Secret Doctrine. And then, you know, other times I wasn't able to find them and I went to other sources. But yeah, it's a fabulous addendum, you know, so thank you for that.
As well as the index that is often, a word may not be in the glossary, but it's in the index. You can find the pages specifically referencing it to.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a book in itself, the index. So, yeah, if you're serious about Secret Doctrine, you know, both of those books are very useful. So, you know, I'd like to move on. So let's move to the next. And if we could have a reader for this page, please.
Okay, do you want one reader or two?
Yes, always. Let's do two in this case. Yeah.
Okay, let's start with.
Oh, by the way, I just want to say, this is concerned with the withdrawing, which the outer world mistakenly sees as the destruction of all but a few fragments of the ancient wisdom teachings. Okay, that's the main thrust of this. Go ahead.
Okay, Eva, can you go ahead, please?
Sure. Indeed, the secret portions of the Dhyan or Dhyan of Gautama's metaphysics, grand as they.
I want to correct this because there was another mispronunciation. It's Gautama. The AU is, and that's the personal name of the Buddha.
Okay.
So, okay. Sorry to correct you, Eva, but I just want that to get in people's consciousness.
So indeed, the secret portions of the Dhyan or Dhyan of Gautama, am I saying that better? Gautama's metaphysics, grand as they appear to one unacquainted with the tenets of the wisdom religion of antiquity, are but a very small portion of the whole. The Hindu reformer limited his public teachings to the purely moral and psychological aspect of the wisdom religion, to ethics and man alone.
Okay, I'm going to stop you. That's physiological. It's an important difference. Moral and physiological.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Things unseen and incorporeal, the mystery of being outside our terrestrial sphere, the great teacher left entirely untouched in his public lectures, reserving the hidden truths for a select circle of his arhats. The latter received their initiation at the famous Spataparna cave near Mount Babhar. Thus, the reader is asked to bear in mind the very important difference between Orthodox Buddhism, that is the public teachings of Gautama, the Buddha, and his esoteric Buddhism.
Okay, stop. Notice here that he uses one D, that she uses one D. Actually, she was a he, but we won't go there for now. And so the esoteric Buddhism is the higher teaching, right? As opposed to Buddhism with two Ds, meaning those who follow the Buddha, which HPB felt should have been Buddhism. Anyway, go on.
That's a good point, thank you. His secret doctrine, however, differed in no wise from that of the initiated Brahmins of his day. The Buddha was a child of the Aryan soil, a born Hindu, a Kshatriya, and a disciple of the twice born, the initiated Brahmins, or Dviyas.
I'm not sure.
His teachings, therefore, could not be different from their doctrines, for the whole Buddhist reform merely consisted in giving out a portion of that which had been kept secret from every man outside of the enchanted circle of temple initiates and ascetics. Unable to teach all that had been imparted to him, owing to his pledges, though he taught a philosophy built upon the groundwork of the true esoteric knowledge, the Buddha gave to the world only its outward material body and kept its soul for his elect. That's from the Secret Doctrine.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so many Chinese scholars have, among the Orientalists, have heard of the soul doctrine. None seem to have understood its real meaning and importance. Yeah, this is Secret Doctrine Introduction, which is, just under 50 pages. So there's, first of all, before I go into commenting, let's go ahead and read the, and Ava, since you're on, if you would just please read the meanings to the right.
Dan or Yana, divine wisdom. Arhats, the worthy one, has entered the highest path and is thus emancipated from rebirth. Saptaparna, sevenfold, the cave referred to had 7 chambers and was often meditated in by the Buddha. We see the image. Buddha, one who acquires Buddha or divine understanding. Aryan or Aryan, name of the 5th root race. Kshatriya, second of 4 Hindu castes, the ruling caste. And Dviyas, initiated Brahman.
Yeah, Dviyas used to mean just being Brahman wasn't enough at the time of the Buddha. They had to have been initiated. Now, they're considered, anybody born into the Brahmin caste is, can carry the sacred thread and therefore is considered a Dviya or Dviya. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. So that's changed. So any comments? I have a couple of thoughts on this, but I want to go to you first. Anybody have any observations or questions about this paragraph?
I don't see anything so far. It's very thought-provoking, so it may take a minute.
Yeah, that's fine. The things that really strikes me right here, and the same thing was true of, Jesus was a Jew, not a Christian. He was a Jew. And obviously the same thing is true here with Buddha. He was a born Hindu, a Kshatriya, the second caste in the Hindu system. If you remember, he was born a prince of the ruling class, when the castes really did determine, what you did in your life. And so this teaching came from the Hindu doctrine, right? But it was a new dispensation. That is very much like when Jesus came. You have the Old and New Testament, this new giving out. But it was rooted in the ancient wisdom teachings of the Hindu philosophy, right? It was essentially esoteric Hinduism. That's what Buddhists became. And he focused on, and she makes a point of this, that she focuses on the purely moral and physiological aspects of the wisdom religion, right? Ethics, because I've heard this, from the sources, that there was so much permeation of doctrine in the society at that time in India that there was this new, more focus on personal responsibility was needed in the teaching, and so he didn't get into higher beings and states of consciousness beyond the human at all. Basically, I mean, I have a neighbor who's a Buddhist monk, and they just don't go there, right? So, but it doesn't mean it wasn't there at all. It's just that the focus was entirely on the moral and physiological aspects, on ethics. Okay, that's my comments. Anybody else have a thought about this paragraph? I see Alex's hand.
Okay, Stacey's got her hand up too. Michael has a question. He wants to know if you could elaborate on HPB, his or her.
I was afraid I'd get caught on that. Sometime look at let me see if I have it here. This is the, let me pull this up before I get myself into the fire here. Okay, this is the dedication of a treatise on cosmic fire, right? Oh, wait a minute, this one isn't that. Yeah, I did put myself in the fire. But DK himself refers to her as him. There's, it was a male being took on a female form because of the receptive polarity that would allow the masters to work through her. And it just wouldn't have been possible. If you've noticed, a lot of the great mediums, including Alice Bailey, are in female bodies when they do this. But there was something more than that going on. It was actually the memories that HPB had of him herself were male, and she often referred to herself in that along that gender. This is not a sexist comment trying to rob the women of the world of this fabulous female being at all. But that's just the facts as I know them. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific reference quote at hand, to take that further. So yes, that's all I can say about that at this time. If anybody can add to that, you're welcome to.
Okay, we got people stacked up now, so let's go to Alex first. Hi, Alex.
Hi. Yeah, I was just going to say that Gautama Buddha of the Kshatriya class, that's warrior class. It's interesting, it doesn't actually tell you that. But only Brahmins were above Kshatriyas, and
right.
He was a warrior class like Arjun.
So warrior rather than ruling. I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Yeah.
And then the third class down was the merchants, right?
Yes, that's right.
Then, right. Okay. Good. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes.
And then we'll go to
if I misspeak, please, as Alex did, correct me, because, this is a group effort. I would really love this to move into, a strong group discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
Stacia, please go ahead. You're self-muted.
Thank you. I'm right in line with Alex's comment about the Kshatriyas being the warriors, and in the statement here implying as a Kshatriya and a disciple of the twice born. So he was first and foremost the Kshatriya, the warrior, but also had the monk. So there was it's truly the synthesis of a warrior monk, which is greatly needed today. To have some discrimination. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The destiny of this incarnation, was obviously predetermined. There's no one at that level of consciousness where the incarnation isn't carefully chosen. And the optimal opportunity for that incarnation was, as Stacey has said, to be a warrior. That is someone who could work in the outer world and yet have this deep connection with the Brahmin class, the initiated Brahmins, which of course he in consciousness surpassed, right? So yeah. Okay, any other comments? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Francis, I have a brief comment. In the Agni Yoga teachings, Master Morya refers to the Buddha as the lion. He refers to Plato as the thinker, and he refers to Freud as the materialist. He has various rubrics for these people, but I thought it's very interesting to think of the Buddha as the lion.
We normally think of the Buddha in reference to Taurus, of course.
Yes, and maybe even Pisces rising, but that's another subject. But for some reason, the heroism with his first ray, personality, and his first ray, sub-ray of the second ray, somehow the strength of the man was really coming through. But one of the things that has often struck me, and I don't know what you think about this, but I have a little analogy here that as the Lord Maitreya was to the initiate Jesus, so the Buddha, already 2,500 years the head of the hierarchy, was to the initiate Gautama. This is something to think about, because basically I think there is a fundamental difference between the head of the hierarchy, who didn't really need to go searching for all those things and had already been there for 2,500 years, and his disciple, who was the anchor, as Jesus was the anchor. This is my impression anyway.
That's really fascinating. We might share with everyone that Buddha and the Christ shared a ray makeup. And as well as Hercules or Heracles, they each had first, second, and sixth ray, but in a different aspects of their makeup. And do you remember offhand, Michael, the setup there?
Yeah, I think I do. Heracles was a first ray soul, a second ray personality, a sixth ray astral body.
Yeah.
Who are we looking at again here?
Jesus and Buddha.
Yeah. The Buddha was a second ray soul on the first sub ray on the soul level, a first ray personality, a sixth ray mind. Very rare phenomena, my brother.
Oh,
he
that
says
was the Buddha. Okay.
The Buddha was the sixth ray mind, and then the Christ. Well, he's obviously a second ray monad, but second ray soul and sixth ray personality, and obviously again a seventh ray physical. But that's really all he gives. Those are the three things. Yeah.
There was a first ray, I think, in the Christ too, but I don't remember.
Yeah, the mind, first ray mind, first ray mind.
First ray mind. So there it is. See, 1, 2, 6. And then he makes the comment that the sixth ray was essential in this for these avatars in order to connect them to humanity. That it had to be present in the makeup in some way. It's interesting that in the Buddha, it was a six-ray mind, which is almost like an oxymoron. You know.
Yeah.
You wouldn't normally. I can't really even imagine what that would look like. But anyway.
And he speaks so clearly. You know, if you read some of the transcriptions of the Buddha's writing, they're lucidity themselves. So how one would detect the six-ray mind, I don't know, but we have to take his word for it, I think. Thanks, Francis.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Francis, we have two more hands up, even rows. But before that, we have a comment from Natalie. She asks, is the Tibetan Buddhist Kalachakra initiation a reflection of the soul for his elect? This last sentence of this paragraph.
Well, I know that the Kalachakra is believed, David Regal, who's he's a true Secret Doctrine scholar. I mean, this guy lives in Colorado. He's an amazing guy. And he wrote a book on that linked the stanzas of Zen to Buddhism. And he says they're this ancient form of the Kalachakra, which is very much connected with the soul doctrine. But that's all I'm really qualified to say on this subject. If anyone else knows the answer, that I'm not Buddhist, and I don't have a deep background in Buddhism, but if anyone else could answer that more intelligently, you're welcome to raise your hand. Okay.
Okay, let's go to the other hands that we've got, if that's okay. Please go ahead, Eva.
Okay, so I just want to go back to the middle of that paragraph, and you kind of covered some of this by it's telling us that Gautama, he had the regular orthodox teachings, which was for the public, and then the esoteric Buddhism, which did not differ from what the initiated Brahmins of the day also knew. Now, those initiated Brahmins, like you said, and this is to underscore what you said, came from a Hindu background. So you can see how they took the essences or the principles from Hinduism, and So that was a point I wanted to make, and that just I think underscores what you had. And then the other thing here is the twice born, because I know that in the Secret Doctrine, HPB refers to the twice born a few times, but here it means the initiated Brahmins. So the Brahmins incarnating into a physical form would be the firstborn, twice born being maybe because they're initiated.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and probably a very specific initiation. My guess is it would be the third or higher. But, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Now that tradition of initiation is completely esoteric, So yeah, the twice born is a broad term that you could apply, to pretty much any stage, starting with, say, discipleship. Just when you step on the path, you're making significant changes. But I think it's more effectively used at the time of initiation. And the third initiation is considered the first major initiation. My money would be on the twice born in an esoteric sense being connected with the third. So
makes sense.
Just my thoughts. Yes. Anyone else?
Yes, I still have to get to Rose, but we have a couple more comments. Leah said DK was a Kalachakra master. And then Gabriella wanted to point out that the Kshatra is a warrior ruler as identified to a warrior caste. Okay, so and that it was probably both.
Okay.
So she wanted to have that. there. So, okay, let's go to Rose. Attendee is self-muted. There we go.
Yes, I wanted to go back earlier to the reference of HPB being referred to as a he. We often see that in DK's writings through Bailey. I'm not even sure I've ever seen it once where he's ever called HPB a her. So I have often thought of that as well, of what is he referring to there. And I've come to about 3 points that might be. One, he could be, when HPB is referred to as a he, it could be in reference to the writings through HPB, which were of, if you want to use, a male origin. Or two, it could be the past incarnation of HPB, as Count Cagliostro. Or three, it could be HPB's current form as a male. And I believe that is probably the most likely, because when she transitioned as HPB, Countess Watchmaker, her master, who was a close friend of hers, said that she came to her in a vision and said, "Bear witness to my new form," and that she appeared before her as a slender, tall man. So that would be saying, this is my new form from this. So those are just my thoughts on that.
Oh, thank you, Rose. That both adds to the mystery and, helps clarify that to somewhat. The dedication, which I was sure referred to Blavatsky as a he, doesn't. He says, dedicated with gratitude to Helena. This is the treatise on cosmic fire. If there was a magnum opus, arguably this would be it. Dedicated with gratitude to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, that great disciple who lighted her torch in the East and brought the light to Europe and America in 1875. So I was sure that right there it referred to her as a he. But in his text, I know that he does at times refer to her as a he. Anyway, but thanks for that additional information. Anyone else?
Yes, I still need to get to Stacia, but before I do that, Gabrielle has added something that I know I was personally thinking, and that is, how is this different than the way that DK refers to all of his disciples in the Dinah books as he and my brother, and a considerable number of them were women.
This is a really good point. Thanks, Gabrielle, for bringing that up. This gets back to the idea that spirit and form are often ascribed a gender orientation. Spirit is seen as male and form as female, as in Mother Earth, and the Father in heaven, right, type of thing. Of course, this is absolutely no comment on the sexes at all, because I read once that a man and a woman are 97% share the same form aspects, and there's only 3% actual difference between them. In the physical form, of course, we all know that there's other differences. But in referring to a brother, he's referring to the spirit aspect. So yes, it could be possible that's the reason that he, does refer to HPB as he. It could have a lot to do with it. Though I think there's a peculiar other mystery going on here. There's one story where she approaches this High Lama, I think it is, and she sticks out her hand, I think, to shake his hand, and he recoils in horror, because in those days a Lama couldn't touch a woman, right? And she breaks out in peals of laughter because she remembers that she's in a female body. So, there's that going on too. But I should have done my homework on this if I was going to bring it up, because I don't have, the quotes. I need to really back it up. So go ahead. You want to call in Stacia or whoever?
I'm trying to, but let me see if I can. Oh, she's self-muted. There you go.
Yes.
Hello. A couple things to recap and a point to last. Oh, battery 15. Great. When Michael was talking about the anchors, he had said Maitreya and Buddha were over the anchors of Jesus and Gautama, respectively.
The Christ and Gautama. The Christ and Gautama.
Okay. And then he said Buddha was sixth ray mind, Jesus or Christ, then, which is totally different. This is a whole other issue. First ray mind. My question is then, what were Gautama's mind ray as well as Maitreya's mind ray? That's question one. And then relative to the beings, Gautama's was Siddhartha, and that name in Sanskrit actually means he who achieves his goal.
Yeah,
and
it's an honorific. Yeah,
and I'm just curious, very curious about that Michael had brought up about the mind ray of each of these spheres. If I could get some clarification.
Well, actually, this information comes from The Destiny of Nations. It's somewhere around page 35 to 38, somewhere in there.
Great, thank you. Okay, so beautiful.
Yeah, and he doesn't give the whole lineup. All he does is he says the point he's trying to make is that the first, second, and sixth rays are always present in these avatars, and then he gives these three as an example, and then he goes on to say, and he tells where those rays occur. But if in some cases the mind was not one of those rays, and so he doesn't mention it. So there is no complete rundown. I would love to know that. Well, Michael said that the Christ had a seventh ray body, so there's that information is somewhere else, I guess.
Maybe, Francis, just the idea of the perfected endocrine system gives me the hint there. I don't think he ever said it, but when you see how he uses his hands and he says, study the use of the hands of the Christ and all of that, it seems, inescapable. But I don't remember that there is a reference per se.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks.
But I also heard.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I also heard Michael say that Gautama, that DK was Gautama reincarnate. Was that correct?
No. This Arya Sangha, who is the founder of the Yogacarya school, which was the first school of esoteric Buddhism after the life of Buddha. So, Arya Sangha as a incarnation of decay.
Because Sangha, that's what
Arya
Buddha,
Sangha. Arya Sangha. Here, let me back up a slide and you'll see it written here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see, for some reason, here we go. Come on, do it. Oh, it's going the wrong way. Now it's really going the wrong way. What's going on? Going up, we're going up. Now one more. Thank you. There we go. That's how it's written. See at the very top on the right? Okay, there it is. Arya Sangha, direct disciple of Gautama and founder of the first Yogacarya school. So, DK came in and further grounded the teaching, one could say, you could bet that those initial students were extraordinary beings, that incarnated into and had the privilege of attending that school. It wasn't, let's see, Which Greek master was DK? Was he also?
He was, well, Cleinias, he was the second in command to Pythagoras, but in terms of Neoplatonism, which is still Greek, the tradition has it that he was Plotinus, who wrote the Aeneid and a great educator. So that's a possibility as one of the leading Neoplatonists.
So, the point of this is just to see that in one could say all three of those cases, that he came in order to ground the ancient wisdom teachings through a school, because, he's a teacher. He's a second-rate master. And that's what has done, with the arcane school and with this body of Alice Bailey works as well. They have that in common.
And Plotinus did the same thing. He did the same thing in Neoplatonism. Yeah.
Oh, that's terrific to know. Yeah. Great.
Does that help? In a mystery school?
It was he founded the first Yogacharya school, which is it was a mystery, which is also a word for ecstatic meditation, right? Or it's connected to that anyway. I'm not sure that this is straight out of this Yogacharya definition, is straight out of Theosophical Glossary. It would, you would like to know more, wouldn't you, than just what's here? But that's all she writes about it. Okay, any other thoughts or questions, folks, before we move on?
I don't see anything.
Okay, I would like to move on. I think it's just to keep some flow going here. So we did this one, and now we come to.
I got another quick question.
Okay.
Thank you, both Francis and Michael. Can you unveil the source of the information about Ari Sangha and DK relatedness?
Okay. It's right in the SD text. And the Arya Sangha is in the Theosophical Glossary. Okay, so there's a book called Theosophical Glossary that was written by Blavatsky, as an aid to reading her works. And this entrance was, my computer is acting really slow. There it is. This definition was in the Theosophical Glossary. Okay? And I have no more information about this, though I'm sure there's, probably if you look in the index, you're going to find a lot more references to this. I haven't to this point done that. So, but in the interest of covering some ground, I'd like to move on at this point. So could we get a reader of the definitions of on this page, please?
Okay, let's go to Leah. Can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Thank you.
Sure.
Exactly.
Gingalese. Gingalese, modern Sinhalese, a member of a people originally from northern India, now forming the majority of the population of Sri Lanka. Gonpa, a temple or lamasery.
Good luck.
Iakhanga?
I think it's an L. I think it's a Hakam.
Lakhang, a subterranean temple for mystic ceremonies. That's why it's hard to pronounce. It's under the ground. Altan Toga, a mountain range in northwestern China that separates the eastern Tarim Basin from the Tibetan Plateau. See the image below.
Yeah, there you have it. Okay. The Sinhalese definition is just from a modern source. The others are from the glossary, Blavatsky's glossary. So just so you know that. Would you just go ahead, Leah, and read the main text there?
Okay. While a prominent Genghis priest assured the writer that it was well known that the most important Buddhist tracts belonging to the sacred canon were stored away in countries and places inaccessible to the European pundits, the late Swami Dayanand Sarasvati, the greatest Sanskritist of his day in India, assured some members of the Theosophical Society of the same fact with regard to the ancient Brahmanical works. For, in all the large and wealthy lamasseries, there are subterranean crypts and caves, libraries cut in the rock, whenever the Gompa and the Lacan are situated in the mountains. Along the ridge of Altentoga, whose soil no European foot has ever trodden so far, there exists a certain hamlet lost in a deep gorge. It is a small cluster of houses with a poor-looking temple in it, with one old lama, a hermit, living nearby to watch it. Pilgrims say that the subterranean galleries and halls under it contain a collection of books, the number of which, according to the accounts given, is too large to find room even in the British Museum.
So astonishing material, huh? Yeah, while you're on, why don't you read this short sentence? This is a similar passage.
Built deep in the bowels of the earth, the subterranean stores are secure, and as their entrances are concealed in such oases, there is little fear that anyone should discover them, even should several armies invade the sandy wastes.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So, HPB begins to draw her introductory to a close, and we're going to close our webinar as she closes her introduction. By stating, and let's get a reader for this. This is near the end of her introduction.
I'm going to go to Eva. She has a question number 1, but she can read too. So, Eva, you're self-muted. Please go ahead.
Okay, my comment was going to be regarding the subterranean civilization, call it what you will. You know, the Tibetan makes reference to that only once, I think, about the fact that there is a subterranean community. There are people living beneath our earth that we're not aware of. And I wonder, because this picture looks so elaborate, it doesn't look like living in a cave.
No, it's a different context. Go ahead.
Okay. In any event, there are other philosophies or other things that have come out that make, again, reference to subterranean lives. So I just put that out, that there is something to that, as much as it's hard for us to conceive of that, you know?
Yeah. Well, first of all, mostly what has been described here is subterranean libraries and subterranean vaults that hold these precious relics of the ancient wisdom teachings, rather than, living arrangements per se. But there are also references, to long underground tunnels that connect, passages that connect in India, these various centers. So, I haven't done a study of that, but I think what he says about actual communities underground is a different kind of reference. So, just my thought on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to read?
Yes.
Okay. The Secret Doctrine was the universally diffused religion of the ancient and prehistoric world. Proofs of its diffusion, authentic records of its history, a complete chain of documents showing its character and presence in every land, together with the teaching of all its great adepts, exist to this day in the secret crypts of libraries belonging to the occult fraternity. It is not the fault of the initiates that these documents are now lost to the profane, nor was their policy dictated by selfishness or any desire to monopolize the life-giving sacred lore. There were portions of the secret doctrine that for incalculable ages had to remain concealed from the profane gaze. But this was because to impart to the unprepared multitude secrets of such tremendous importance was equivalent to giving a child a lighted candle in a powder magazine.
Yes, thank you. And it's as hard as it may be to believe, that is a child in a lighted in a powder magazine could only destroy their own life and whoever was in there with them physically, but misuse and premature knowledge of occult power can do much worse damage than to just end your physical life, because it can do permanent damage to your etheric body and to your astral and mental bodies as well, especially in regards to the protective netting that surrounds each chakra. But once you rupture that, there are untoward entities that can enter you, and it can take lifetimes in order to heal this. So it's this is not an understatement at all. In fact, I mean, it's not an overstatement at all. You know, in fact, if anything, it might be more like an understatement when you consider its real ramifications. Okay. Any questions about this this paragraph?
I don't see any.
Okay, I am going to push us a little bit because I want to finish, if we can, the introductory before we. It is a little ways down the line, so maybe we can't. I think I'm just getting greedy. I think we'd end up going to, 5 after, 10 after to do that. So I think we had better call it a day right here. I hope that you all are as fascinated with this material as I am, and that you'll move with us as we approach the actual material. We get into very shortly. We'll get into the proem, which is the Secret Doctrine proper, page 1, so to speak, and it's just the most fascinating, enlightening material that you can read. So I urge you all to rejoin us next month on the third Sunday. And until then, thank you very much for signing up. And I hope to see you all back then.
Francis?
Yeah.
I just want to say Michael has posted a comment to the entire audience.
Great.
That Nagarjuna or Kuthumi and Ari Sangha, DK, worked together in one of the earlier centuries AD, just as they did in Pythagorean times. So, that relationship continued.
Pythagoras would have been, more like 6th century.
And I believe we're told is the same with Kuthumi and Master Moira, right?
Yes.
They have spent many lifetimes.
They have, yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Well.
Right. So I'll just throw it open. And in general, are there any final comments or questions about any material that we covered today, except the sex of HPV? Just kidding. Anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make about any of the material that we covered today?
Yes, Tuya would like to say something. Please go ahead.
Oh, hey, Tuya.
Hello. Thank you for very interesting discussions. Sorry that I am just only now lifted my hands because I wanted to find the name of the little town in Tibet. If Leia would remember that, because we were there a few years ago and we visited in a monastery, which is said that it holds the most of the Buddhist scriptures. And I had, yes?
That was the Sakya monastery.
Sakya.
Yeah.
Okay, because there happened something interesting that I was allowed to go into that library. And it was enormous. It was behind the main monastery. And there were, as you had this image, I think it was the one image before, where you have those little squares. Can you go backwards?
Yeah, there we go.
That's right. So where you see those little squares, they that looks like that they have one book, but there were like several books, and they are those scriptures which are very thin. I don't know, is that papyrus paper? And the volumes are enormous. I don't know how many hundreds, thousand pages. But the energy was so strong. I have never ever had in any physical place such a feeling of the hierarchy. It was like these letters, they were filling the air, and I had to even one point just stop and lie or lean against, there was a pillars, against a pillar, because it was so tense, energetically, and so sacred. And that is what Glenn was then telling us, that in that monastery they were able to save major part of the teaching when Chinese were coming and they were destroying almost 90% of the monasteries and the writings. But they were able to bring to this monastery to those ancient old writings.
Wow.
So it was fantastic. And it was just bringing my mind what Blavatsky was saying about Kalevala. That is our, is it called epic, Michael? How it is called in English? Anyway, this kind of a story, like Iliad and Odyssey.
It's an epic.
Yeah, so it's Finnish epic. And she was saying that for future students, there is going to be one key for the mysteries. And in our epic are told also about those ancient places. And the Lapis people are telling about those doors into the inner worlds or down to earth. And they have some legends about writings which are kept secret. So I don't know is the physical placement also here in the north, but that is how their stories are telling. So maybe we should start to investigate. Everybody comes to Lapland now next year, and then we go to Tibet together.
Sounds like a party. I would love it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all what I
Thank
wanted.
you, Tuya.
Oh, by the way, there is in India one city which is called Kalevala. And there, in our stories, it is told that there were like 12 tribes, and one of those tribes came into the north, who were supposed to guard the teaching or the secret wisdom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tuya. Okay, very interesting. What I'd like to do, this is just spontaneous, but I would like to close with a mantra. I think it's important with this group to do that. And so I wasn't really prepared for this, but I'm going to open one up here in Microsoft Word and bring that forward. Let's see here. You bear with me just a moment. Okay, here we go. All right, if we could say this together. Actually, you could just, since you're all self-muted, you could speak it with me if you would like. And we'll close on this. And then I hope to see you all next month, third Sunday, same time. And thank you again for joining us today. May the energy of the divine self inspire, and the light of the soul direct. May we be led from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality. We stand in spiritual being, and as souls we serve. We stand within the light, and as that light shines throughout our forms, we radiate that light. We stand within the love of God, and as that love streams through and from the heart, we magnetize the ones we seek to aid. Thank you all, and see you next time.
Good night, everybody. Or good morning, or good day, or